Hello, welcome back to the bench. As we have all seen, DJI have released their sexiest drone ever, which is the Phantom 4. There's been a lot of rumours and speculation over the last couple of weeks, and here it is. The tomato has landed, as it was being called. We saw some pictures, we saw some hints and tips, which we didn't really believe. However, they were actually all bang on by the looks of it. The battery, the aircraft. Now in this video I'm going to just talk about some specific things. I'm not going to talk too much about what we already know about. I want to talk about some specific differences and what will and won't work with the Phantom 3, etc. The very basics on the Phantom 4, just getting into it. Shiny shell, let's hope this is a whole new material. They've moved over now to a magnesium core on the gimbal. We'll come back to more of that in a minute. We've got the two cameras on the front for the object avoidance. New motors, you will notice these now sit on top of the shell with cooling in the base. Now DJI have said the reason they sit on top of the shell is to try and keep the props out of view even more than before, and there's a good reason for this. A couple of the new features DJI have added I want to talk about, and I want to talk about some specific things I've picked up on. New battery, very large new battery, slightly larger capacity than the Phantom 3, but a whole redesign. The pack is actually a lot bigger. Quite interested to know what's going on in that pack. New connector, different way it connects into the craft. They've got rid of the way the old batteries used to connect with the two big pins on the side and the two data pins. It is now a new proprietary connector on the back end of the pack. Downsides, not compatible with the Phantom 3 or its charger in any way or form. So it is a new battery and new charger setup. New charger DJI supply with the battery is 100 watts. The battery's maximum charge capacity is 100 watts. So I don't think we're going to see a faster charger for it either. It is a new proprietary connector right on the back of the battery. This is reversible, so it goes in whichever way. It's a bit like the Apple Lightning connector. It will go in one way or the other. Obviously, this new connector is going to cause some problems for the people making aftermarket chargers and stuff, but I suspect they'll get on top of it fairly soon. Moving on to tap to fly. Something specifically I have picked up on this. It's a feature where you can tap on the tablet and tell the aircraft to go there. Nice. There's meant to be like a little horizon mark in the middle of the screen when you use this. It's been noted that if you tap into, say, the sky and tell it to go, it will basically fly forever. Now, what I've not been able to figure out is what happens when it goes out of range. I will assume that return to home will kick in. However, you can cancel the action and say stop, but it is being recommended that if you use tap to fly, just set a maximum distance in the aircraft settings just to give you a fail-safe. Also, DJI have added now a new pause button on the remote control. They've readjusted the buttons. They're all in the same positions, but they've given them new features as compared to the Phantom 3. And they've added one of them now is a pause button, a bit like the Solo. So if it did start to fly away, you can hit that pause at any time. That pause only works in these flight modes. It doesn't work in normal flight. In normal flight, your pause is basically come off the sticks. Visual tracking. With the two new cameras on the front, DJI have introduced visual tracking. Now this is a big feature. You've got the two cameras and the main camera. Now visual tracking is mostly using the main camera. We think most of this is actually in software on the DJI Go app. Some of it will be in hardware on the aircraft and software on the aircraft, but in theory most of this is actually within the DJI Go app. There has been talk whether this could come back to the Phantom 3. I don't think DJI would or could do it, to be perfectly honest. Now, DJI, as part of this, have introduced new flight modes for the Phantom 4. You've got your existing DJI GPS mode, which includes the new sensors. So that's the two optical image sensors at the front. It uses your camera for image tracking. They've also added an additional camera to the base of the aircraft. So for the VPS system, you've got 2 sensors and 2 cameras now. This new mode only flies at about 20 miles an hour. The aircraft has added another mode called Sport Mode, which I'll come to in a second. But the mode that includes all your normal IOC features, so waypoints, things like that, visual tracking, the new visual tracking, the object avoidance, as I'll talk about in a minute. This new mode is limited to between 20 and 22 mile an hour, so it is slower than the Phantom 3. This new sport mode DJI have added is up to 45 miles an hour, so this is very quick compared to the Phantom 3. This is actually in Inspire 1 territory. Now, there are some specifics about this mode. Object avoidance, VPS and tracking do not work in this mode. This is a mode where the aircraft will bank to a maximum of 45 degrees and it will give you a very fast flying experience. Now, this is one of the reasons DJI have increased the height of the motors, is to try and keep the props out of view in this mode. There has been props still showing up in some view. But this mode is a bit of like an FPV sport mode is what they're sort of marketing it at. But there is no object avoidance, no safety net. You still have GPS, you still have compass, but there's none of the new toys basically. So what you've got is a slower traditional mode, but a new fast sport mode. With the new battery, as we were talking earlier, it has also increased flight time to 28 minutes, DJI saying. There have been some solid reports of actually 30 from some of the reviews, so it's going to be very interesting indeed to see how that pans out. A couple of other things I want to talk about. You've got new materials and designs. As we were saying, DJI have moved a lot of the gimbal up into the bottom. What you've got now, I found this picture roaming around Facebook, is they've moved the electronics for the gimbal, the camera electronics, the yaw motor, all up into the base of the aircraft. Now this is new magnesium core, they're calling this, so that only leaves the bottom of the yaw motor, the pitch and roll motors down here. They still have this ribbon cable people often complain about in view. Another one of the big updates is they've moved to a dual supported gimbal, so it is now supported on both sides. So the camera is now supported, the motor is on one side, but the camera is supported on both. So this is a very nice improvement indeed. The multiple flight modes, as I was talking about, you've got this new fast sport mode, the new battery, vision, sense and avoid. Now, this is a very new feature, part of the new cameras DJI have added on the side. With the extra cameras, it's got avoidance. So the aircraft, if you try to fly it into a wall, will stop before you hit it. Now, this has been demonstrated and seems to be working very, very well. There are some provisos over it. Avoidance does not work in sport mode, so you have to be aware of that. If you are in sport mode, avoidance does not work. It does work in return to home. So if you accidentally fly at a range and you haven't taken into account a couple of trees because you've arced around from your takeoff point, as it's coming up, it will try to avoid those trees if the sensors can pick it up. Now, here is where it gets a bit interesting. It's not going to pick up things like power lines or very, very thin branches. It's going to need some meat behind it to be able to pick it up. So this is a really good feature, but it is not the absolute savior to pull you out of the bucket of crap you've dug yourself into. This will hopefully protect you, but it is not to be absolutely relied upon unless you know what is in the area. So it is a very, very welcome feature. It's going to be very interesting to see how this pans out. DJI is selling this very well. I just hope they're not overselling it, as marketing can sometimes do. But from what I've seen, it works very, very well. Pardon me. Tap and fly. As I spoke about earlier, you can tap it on the screen in one place and it will just fly there. Active track, so it will track the person. Now this uses, it seems to be based off contrast partly. So when you track an object, it will track it, and it's to do with the light conditions and the contrast in the scene. If you're in scenes with very rapid changes in contrast, it could cause problems. The camera. Now, there are reports of some really good changes to the camera. Some pictures have been posted and there is a substantial improvement in quality. Now, there's not believed to be any change in the sensor itself, but the optics have been changed and the images are far crisper and sharper. So hopefully there's been some firmware tweaks and optical tweaks which make this a fairly decent improvement. D-Log is just D-Log, integrated gimbal, obviously, as I was discussing earlier, everything into the base, which is a nice welcome change. It doesn't look like an afterthought anymore. DJI Go, obviously it will still support DJI Go as before. Couple of other things before I hop on to software. It's got dual IMU and compass modules. Now DJI is selling this as built-in redundancies. They haven't really told anybody a lot about exactly how it works, but what they say is dual compass modules and dual integral measurement units allow the Phantom 4 to constantly check the data it's receiving. So we're assuming there is some error checking going on between two sets of data, and it's either binning one or it's mixing them up and coming up with a third new figure. It's going to be interesting. Phantom 3 was very, very reliable in the sense of they never flew away. Very, very few reports of the aircraft, heading off into the sunset on its own. So this isn't something people are demanding. We must have redundancy. However, it is a very welcome feature. Push and release props. This is another big thing they've added. QR props to the Phantom 3. From the Phantom 3 to the Phantom 4. So the Phantom 3 was the screw-on type. The Phantom 4 now has this QR. Very nice feature to add, very similar to the Inspire QR prop. My only concern is I hope people do understand that these things need replacing fairly regularly. It is a wear and tear part. So after a number of uses, 60-70 flights, 60-70 uses, you want to be changing the QR adapters. They will be cheap. They are a wear and tear part. They hold the aircraft in the air, so it is not worth messing around. So it's just worth thinking about, you've hit X amount of hours, 60, 70 flights, 100 hours or something, change the QR adapters. Don't leave them on there forever because they are what is holding your aircraft in the air. Remote controller, they've done some changes to the controller. Two changes. Some of the buttons have changed function. There's a new pause button, as I mentioned earlier. It's the same button, they've just given it a new use. They have finally added the aluminium tablet holder. Now, this should have been included with the Phantom 3 Pro, to be honest. It was a silly problem that would mean it would wobble about, and it was a cheap upgrade. But if you're spending this kind of money, you shouldn't have to upgrade it, to be perfectly honest. But it's now included, so that's a very good thing. Now, it doesn't come with HDMI as standard, as exactly the same as the Phantom 3 didn't. The information that seems to be roaming around is the HDMI board off the Phantom 3 is compatible. However, there needs to be a firmware update on it before it will work. So it probably won't be ready for launch, but at some time in the near future, there should be a firmware update and you can add your HDMI output. It's the same light bridge. It's still using normal 720p light bridge. Controller wise, from Phantom 3 to Phantom 4, the information that we've been given is looking round. There are 3 versions of controllers that were released for the Phantom 3. They are all GL300. It is just either A, B or C. A was the first, B was the revision, and then C is the latest. The A and B will not work. However, they are saying the C will. So it still remains to be seen if that is the case, but that is the information that's been handed out. There's a report that the Inspire 1 controller will work, and there's a report that the Inspire 1 controller won't work. So as it stands here and now, I would say it won't, because there are also several revisions of that controller as well. Finally, I wanted to just come on to some things I spotted with it. First of all, DJI have moved back over to having PC-based software for updating the firmware on the Phantom 4. They're going to be calling it the DJI Assistant 2. It has just been released for the M100. It is also going to work with the Phantom 4 and any DJI future craft. Whether it will work with the Phantom 3 as well, it doesn't here and now today. That has been tried, but perhaps after a firmware update it will. The advantage to this is it allows you to update the firmware by plugging your aircraft into your computer. Now, the SD card update method was a really simple method. However, a lot of people struggled due to a number of reasons. Not unzipping the firmware, formatting the card on a Mac could give you problems. Downloading the file multiple times on a Mac can also give you problems because it relabels the file each time and adds a number into the name. So what DJI have done have gone back to using a PC-based software. At the moment, I believe you can also upgrade the Phantom 4. The people who've got one, there are some early demo units out there, can update via the app, but we don't know if that's going to remain. What we do know is it will be the Phantom 4 using the DJI Assistant 2. So that's an interesting change going back to PC software, but I quite welcome that one. Last thing, the DJI put a video out, a rendered video of the setup, the Phantom 3 sort of exploded and back together, and it's just a couple of things I spotted on it which I find very, very interesting. The setup, they've got this core in the middle now where everything is mounted to, which is really quite nice. It reminds me of the IMU setup on the WKM or A2. It's like a square box with the boards, the IMUs, folded around a square in the middle. So what you got is boards around each side, the main board at the bottom. Look at the cooling, there's a lot of cooling there. Now obviously this is just a render, but it looks a fairly accurate one. So yeah, there's a lot more processing power in this aircraft, there really is. Another interesting tidbit I picked up was they have gone back to separate ESCs. So you've got two boards, one on each side of this core where the battery goes in, and there are two ESCs on each board, one for the left hand side of the aircraft, one for the right hand side of the aircraft. So that's a very welcome change. So at least if you do pop an ESC, you don't have to change the whole main board. It is back to a separate board. Now whether DJI will make that available is a whole other story. However, it is welcome to see separate unit again. Although it is two on one board, it's still a vast improvement over one main board. The final thing is the isolation for the gimbal. It's not a very good image, but you can still see they're using 4 isolators. These click into the base. We're not sure if it's under tension or compression, to be honest. You can't quite see, but you can see that there is a traditional kind of setup there with the yaw motor in the middle. And that was it. I hope I've been able to answer some questions. Hope this video has been helpful. I'm hoping to be able to get my hands on one fairly soon. I'm not going to get one for launch, unfortunately. I'm not in the position to do that. However, I intend to be trying to get my hands on one as soon as I possibly can and put out a few more videos. Looking through the specs, it's pretty much the same as the Phantom 3, the light bridge. The battery is now 5350 milliamp hour, so it's going to take longer to charge. It is going to take a bit longer to charge, which is always a downside. Range is increased a little bit as well over the Phantom 3. Looking at it, I don't think DJI have done a lot. They've tweaked the outputs, I think, a little bit. That's all they've done. Again, max speed 20 meters a second in sports mode. approximately 28 minutes battery. So yeah, very similar specs. Camera specs are virtually the same, but as I said, actual stills taken from the camera have shown to be quite an improvement. So would I recommend the Phantom 4 or the Phantom 3? You know what, I would actually. I think it's a very, very interesting development. It's a shame there isn't more sensors all around the aircraft, but that'll come next year. You know, DJI it's the old Intel releasing stage at a time thing. You know, it's an extremely impressive packaging, the Phantom 4. The way they've done it, they've crammed an awful lot in there. And still moving that gimbal up into the base as well. So, you know, they have done quite an impressive amount of work on this aircraft. It does still look like a big yellow blob. People have still complained it's not a complete redesign, but you know what? It's a Phantom. I think it should always look like that. You know, it's iconic in its own way now. So yeah. One last thing, there is a little mystery port on the bottom of the camera and no one knows what it does. Hopefully we're going to dig up what that little port does. It might only be on pre-release models, and it might be something to do with programming the camera for pre-release or something. You could just see it there, look, there's a slight hint of it there. So I don't know, we'll have to see. But that's it. Thank you very much for watching. If you'd like to support my channel, there's a couple of links in the page below, which are affiliate links to DJI. If you are going to purchase your Phantom 4, you can do it through that and help support the channel. Thank you very much and goodbye.